I've always thought the Razer Blade Stealth is kind of like an anti-MacBook. Yes, it is a thin and light device, but it packs so many high-end specs into it that it really sets itself apart from most other thin and lights. And frankly, I haven't had the best of luck with Razer Blade Stealth in the past. In 2017, I purchased 7 through my store, of which 4 had major hardware issues that needed to be RMA'd. But today is a new day, and this Razer Blade Stealth is significantly different than that one. And so I'm willing to give it a full review and figure out whether this is the best de facto laptop for those of us who don't want to switch to macOS. Is it? Let's talk about it. This is InnoISO, and this is the Razer Blade Stealth 2020 review. The Razer Blade Stealth's flat black color scheme is relatively muted for a company that has 3 snakes as its logo. Yes, the logo doesn't light up like earlier models, but I count that as a positive for those of us who want to bring the Razer Blade Stealth into the office. Now, if I was bringing it into the office, I would say I'd probably put like a company logo sticker or some stickers to cover up that logo, but otherwise the laptop itself is relatively muted and professional looking, as long as you can get over the logo and the RGB keyboard. I do appreciate the flat black color palette, and I think it's a nice departure from the traditional aluminum that we've gotten used to on a lot of other devices. But this flat black attracts fingerprints very, very poorly, similarly to the Surface Pro X that I reviewed at the end of last year. And then the other problem that I have with it is it seems to have a very thin black coating, and so any dings along the edges, you can actually see an aluminum or a silver coloring shining through. Same goes for around the charging ports, where I've tried to plug in the charging cable and missed a little bit. You can see the scrapes are actually silver, which is a little bit disappointing that the coating isn't deep enough to cover that up. The whole laptop is relatively thin and portable considering its specs. Now, of course, this isn't as thin and light as the MacBook Air or MacBook Pro, but I would have loved to have this in college over the 15-inch larger laptop that I was carrying around because it fits perfectly into a backpack and it's pretty easy to lug around. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to be offering a special discount on this laptop on my eBay page. If you're interested, watch till the end of the video and I'll tell you more details. I will say though that the entire design is more visually appealing than ergonomically appealing. While the keyboard deck is deep enough in order to comfortably fit my hands on it, unfortunately the edges are really sharp to the point where if I rest my hands on the edges of the device, I'd be worried that I was going to cut my hands open on how sharp the edges are. That's why it's called Razer Blade. Like most MacBooks, the Razer Blade has speakers flanking either side of the keyboard that produce pretty great sound quality. The downside of this is the speaker grills are quite thin of a mesh, and they actually attract dust quite a bit, and it's pretty tough to clean it all out. Despite those speakers being quite good, I wouldn't really want to watch movies and videos on this device, and that's because of the screen. Now, the screen is a 1080p non-touch display with notably 120 Hz. This model, the Razer Blade Stealth, might be the last model that has a 16:9 aspect ratio screen, because this year was the year of 16:10 displays with the Razer Book, several Dell laptops, HP, and Lenovo, all starting to make devices that have 16:10 aspect ratio screens. And so as a result, 16:9 might look older, but for me, it's not too big of a deal. I would like the extra screen real estate of a 16:10 aspect ratio screen on this, but it's not the biggest deal. As a 1080p display, I've seen a lot better displays than this. I'm fine with the fact that it's matte, which means that there's going to be a lot less problems with reflections than more glossy displays, but it's quite a bit dimmer and the colors are not very bright compared to some of the other 1080p displays that I've tested out in the last year. And as a result, it's not really that appealing to watch videos on. Now, of course, the 120 Hz is not really meant for watching videos, but instead gaming. And so that takes us to the performance of this device. If you plan on using this device for gaming, this model specifically has a GTX 1650 Ti, 16 gigs of RAM, and a Core i7 10th generation. Those are pretty incredible specs for such a thin and light device. I really appreciate the relatively competent graphics card being in this, even if it's kind of one of the more entry models of the GTX or the Nvidia lineup. Personally, I'm not a big gamer, but I did test a number of older AAA titles on this that ran perfectly fine, and a few modern titles when I turned down the graphics settings quite a bit. Newer games like Cyberpunk 2077 will probably not even run on this device. I had trouble getting anything going at more than a slow crawl, even on the lowest settings for Cyberpunk. Obviously, Cyberpunk is renowned for having absolutely terrible performance on anything but the highest end system. Now, if I really wanted to play AAA titles on the Razer Blade Stealth, I would probably hook up an external graphics card, which is an incredible feature to have for a thin and light laptop. If only all systems did it with Thunderbolt 3. Now, while I'm not a gamer, I am in a way a creator, and I did use this for editing videos. I used it on Premiere Pro, which is my primary video editing software, and I compared it side by side with the MacBook Air. Now, the MacBook Air is really impressive that you can somehow achieve relatively good video editing experience on such a tiny little fanless device. But the Razer Blade Stealth totally kept up with it. I could totally edit most of my 4K videos on this device, and while it did get a little hot and slowed down as the video got more and more complex, or the timeline got more and more complex, this was perfectly competent, and I didn't find any sort of big difference in the performance. Now, you could say that's a testament to the MacBook Air because it's fanless, but I could seriously consider editing videos on this device, with one caveat. One thing I love about the MacBook Air is the fact that it's fanless. Not necessarily because I don't like having the extra performance, but I hate the idea of having this really loud system sitting on my lap while I'm editing on the couch, for example. And this device, the Razer Blade Stealth, specifically gets quite loud and really hot. And so it's not really comfortable to sit on the couch with this frying my lap. But the unfortunate thing is those times weren't the only times that the fan of the Razer Blade Stealth kicked in. Even when I was just relaxing on my couch, browsing Chrome, or had a couple of Excel files open, the fan would still kick in full speed, and I really didn't need that much, oomph in order to do what I was doing. And I really wish there was like a pure fanless mode that the Razer Blade Stealth could operate on. The good news is, remember how I mentioned that I'd have a lot of problems with Razer Blade Stealths in the past? Well, most of those problems revolved around the cooling system. And despite this cooling system being relatively loud, I'm not having any of the same manufacturer's defects on this device. And so I'm a lot more confident with the longevity and the ability for it to last several years. Now let's talk about that glittery keyboard. If it's not obvious already, I'm not the biggest fan of the gamer aesthetic. Sure, I understand some people liking their laptops looking cool, but a lot of times the breathing or the cycling effect of the keyboard's colors is more distracting to me. I'm the type of person that if I see motion or change, I will automatically want to focus on it. And so when I'm trying to focus on work or editing or anything like that, and I'm distracted by the breathing effect of my keys, it's not the best impact. And so as a result, I can change it and customize it however I want through the Razer Chroma software. Great. So now I go into the software, change my settings so it stays the same color, except for this is software locked, meaning that the keyboard doesn't actually save this information when that software is closed. So when I log out of the device and log back in, or when I restart, then I'm going to see the same rainbow puke of before. And I have to wait every single time for the Razer software to open up in the background every time I start up the computer. And oddly enough, there wasn't a lot of consistency of when the software would open. Sometimes the software just wouldn't open in the background and I'd have to manually open it, which just led to more frustration. The other half of Razer's custom software is Synapse, which allows you to customize everything about the keyboard in terms of keyboard shortcuts. I love this. This is awesome. I wish all manufacturers had this feature. Yes, technically you can achieve the same thing with third-party applications, but not nearly to the extent and the ease that you can with this keyboard. It was all intuitive enough for even me to get and change all of the keys that I want to very, very quickly. The most notable example of this is the F1 key, which the F1 key is an absolute nightmare for those of us that frequently work in Excel. And yes, you can customize the Excel functionality, but across all programs, I'd love to just turn off the F1 key and reprogram it as the F2 key. And it is very simple on this keyboard. I really wish Razer would make the same software for all laptops and keyboards, but obviously they're not going to because that would be very difficult. But the only other problem that I have with it is software, so similarly it has to be running in the background, and there's been the occasional time where I have to reopen it because it didn't open properly on boot. Outside of the software experience, the keyboard itself is fine. I'm not the biggest fan of Razer's key switches. I feel like they took too much from the MacBooks from, say, 2015, where the keys feel a little rattly and a little stiff. It's kind of hard to describe, but I found that these keys were significantly less comfortable to type on than a lot of other modern Windows laptops. The best way I can think to describe it is it's kind of like a click more so than a key press. It kind of has a lot of resistance at the top, and then once you get past that resistance, the whole thing depresses quite easily. Whereas the laptops that I prefer have more consistent resistance and more squishiness through the key travel, like Dell XPS keyboards or Microsoft Surface keyboards. Maybe this is the type of keyboard designed for gamers? Let me know down in the comments if you are one. The layout of the Blade Stealth's keyboard is almost perfect with a few exceptions. The first being the size of the backslash key, which is quite tiny. And since I use that key for a lot of things during coding, I'm a little bit disappointed in it. But the real problem is instead the positioning of the delete and the power keys. So instead of having a dedicated power button off from the keyboard, it is instead replacing where the delete key was for many Dell laptops, Surface laptops, ThinkPads, and a lot of other Windows devices. And so as a result, I instinctively try and touch the top right key when I'm trying to delete something, and instead I get the power key. And thankfully you have to hold it down in order to put the laptop to sleep, but it ends up doing nothing. And this is notably, understandably, the only key that can't be customized through Razer Synapse software, and so there's no solution for me. Now, if it wasn't enough that the keyboard takes cues from MacBooks, I can absolutely say that the trackpad does. Unlike other Windows laptops, this trackpad has a tiny bit of travel, and such so that the click almost feels a lot closer to the Force Touch trackpad that you have on MacBooks. And this is a real frustration for me, because it's obviously not Force Touch. Now, I do find that there is a better distribution of the click pressure so that you can click in a number of different places, more so than a lot of other Windows laptops, but I just don't like the experience of this really shallow, non-feedback click. But the trackpad is a lot larger than a lot of other Windows laptops, so if you are used to MacBook trackpads, this will be kind of closer to your experience. Either side of the device has a USB-A and a Thunderbolt port, which is an awesome departure from the one-sided experience of now modern MacBooks. And so I like being able to plug in my charger to either side of the device. Now, I had a little bit of incompatibility or inconsistency with my Dell D6000 docking station that is supposed to be universal, that works for nearly every other device except for the MacBook Air. Sometimes both my monitors or some of my peripherals wouldn't attach properly to this device until I detached them and reattached them. So it's just not 100% relative to a lot of other devices. All in, the Razer Blade Stealth is an absolute powerhouse as far as thin and lights goes, with a lot of additional capacity outside of the normal day-to-day browsing. I think if you want to game or if you want to create content, then the Razer Blade Stealth could be an absolutely great thin and light device for you. Now, unfortunately, it's not going to have the gaming prowess of a larger 15-inch laptop with a larger, higher-end dedicated graphics card. So if you're looking specifically for the ability to game on your laptop, this is probably not the right choice. And I will say that in this kind of pandemic world, going for a larger laptop might be the better choice, considering you might not be lugging that laptop around as much in at least the next couple months. But if you want a thin and light device that you can carry anywhere and bring to a coffee shop once the world is back to normal and still edit videos and play some games on it, then this is an excellent solution. These are going for a little over $1,000 on eBay, which is a little bit more than a MacBook Air and lower than a MacBook Pro. And so it is a great alternative for those of us who want to stick with Windows. Personally, I'm not going to be sticking with the Razer Blade Stealth because I'm probably looking for something a little bit larger for video editing and maybe a little bit thinner and smaller for my daily computing. And so this doesn't really solve that. But if I wanted one device to do everything, this would probably be a good solution. So here's the deal. If you are interested in the Razer Blade Stealth, I will be selling this device on my eBay page for the next 7 days. For those of you who watch this channel, you can use this code at the bottom of the screen and you can get 15% discount off the final price if you win the auction. So basically, I'm trying to incentivize you or viewers of my channel to also buy on my eBay page and vice versa. And so as a result, if you win the auction, you're going to get the discount. And I'm going to be planning on releasing more of these discount codes as time goes on. This is kind of my first try at it. So let me know down in the comments if you're interested, and I will be happy to point you to it. If you aren't the lucky winner of the Razer Blade Stealth, or if you're watching this more than 7 days after its release, don't worry, because I'm going to be doing more of these in the future. Be sure to get subscribed so you can catch all of them, and I'll be sure to let you know the discount codes for all of my products on eBay. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.